What's your story of teaching your rigid child that mercy isn't weakness? My 10-year-old son had been standing outside the bathroom door for 10 minutes, and when his sister finally emerged, he got in her face screaming that she'd taken 16 minutes instead of 15, and she needed to be punished immediately. I stood in the hallway watching my youngest child practically vibrate with excitement at catching another violation, while my daughter just looked exhausted and defeated, like she couldn't even exist in her own home without being monitored. Later that night at dinner, he pulled out a notebook where he'd been documenting every single infraction his siblings had committed, including timestamps and what he called evidence ratings, based on how badly he thought each violation warranted punishment. Dad, you need to see this because at 3:29 p.m., my brother left his backpack by the door for 2 entire minutes instead of taking it to his room, and at 9:01 p.m., my sister was still on her phone even though bedtime is 9, and I have photographic proof of both incidents right here on my phone. He was talking so fast he was barely breathing, and his older brother just pushed his food around his plate without eating while his sister stared at the wall. These two teenagers were living like inmates under surveillance by a 10-year-old who thought he was doing something noble. Mercy is for weak parents, he actually said to me when I suggested maybe we could let the phone thing slide. My son had just reported that his brother didn't rinse his cereal bowl within 30 seconds of finishing breakfast, and was demanding that we take away his basketball practice when I finally snapped and told everyone we were implementing a new 3-strike system, where 3 infractions would equal losing your biggest upcoming privilege. My youngest practically glowed with satisfaction, thinking this would give him even more power. But what he didn't know was that after he went to bed, I told his siblings to just play along and ignore the whole thing, because this system was only ever going to apply to one person in our house. The next morning, my son was so busy trying to catch his sister forgetting something that he left his own cereal bowl sitting on the counter while he ran to get his camera to document that she'd left a light on. And when he came back, I was standing there looking at the bowl. That's strike 1. You reported your sister for not rinsing her bowl immediately just yesterday, remember? His mouth fell open and he started to argue, but I cut him off with his own favorite phrase about how rules don't have exceptions, and I watched him realize that the system he'd begged for now applied to him too. Suddenly, he wasn't quite as excited about strict enforcement anymore. For the next 3 days, he moved through the house like every step might trigger a landmine, setting timers for his showers and counting his steps from the door to the hook where his backpack belonged, and measuring the exact amount of milk in his cereal bowl to avoid any possible infraction. He ate standing up so he could rinse his bowl within 5 seconds, and he set 4 different alarms to make sure he was in bed before 8:59. His siblings watched him slowly unravel with barely hidden satisfaction after months of his tyranny. That Thursday afternoon when he got home from school, he dropped his backpack by the door for literally 30 seconds while he ran to the bathroom because he'd been holding it all day, rather than risk being late to class. And when he came back, I was standing there. Strike 2. You said your brother leaving his backpack here for any amount of time was unacceptable. The color drained from his face because his academic decathlon championship was in 2 days, and he was the youngest competitor in the entire district. One more strike would cost him the victory he'd been working towards since September. Friday night, he went to bed at 8:30 to avoid any possible bedtime violations, and triple-checked that his uniform was laid out and his presentation notes were in order. But then at 9:01 p.m., he realized he'd forgotten to set his alarm for the morning and grabbed his phone for just 10 seconds to set it. I walked into his room at that exact moment because I'd been waiting and watching with the same vigilance he'd shown his siblings for months. That's strike 3. You're on your phone after 9, which is exactly what you reported your sister for on Tuesday. The phone slipped from his fingers and crashed onto the floor, and his eyes went huge with tears as he realized that according to his own rules, he'd just lost the championship. He was sobbing so hard his whole body was shaking. Mom, please, I was just setting my alarm and you know how hard I've worked. He was gasping for air between sobs, and snot was running down his face. I'm the youngest person on the team, and everyone is counting on me, and this is the state championship, and I wasn't really breaking the rule because I just needed 10 seconds to set an alarm. Please, Mom, please. The words tumbled out in broken pieces. I sat on his bed and let him cry before saying quietly, your sister was checking her dance schedule when you reported her, and your brother was grabbing his water bottle when you photographed his backpack. Every single time you've reported them, they've had a reason, just like you do right now. But you told me that mercy was for weak parents, remember? He was hiccuping through his sobs and he whispered, I just wanted to be the good one. I stood up and walked to his door, then turned back and said, set your alarm. The competition starts at 8 and everyone deserves grace, including Tattletales who finally learned their lesson.